Today, we're breaking down the best defenses to stash for the fantasy football playoffs. First team I want to talk about for week 15 are the Philadelphia Eagles going up against the Las Vegas Raiders. So, roster percentage may be lower than expected for how good of a unit they are overall, but a lot of that has to do with their last three opponents being the Packers, Lions, and Cowboys. And they did fall apart in the Cowboys game, but they held the Packers and Lions to under 10 points each. And there's a chance they don't get picked up this week with their next two opponents being the Bears and Chargers, but this recommendation has to do with their week 15 matchup at home against the Raiders. Geno Smith has been sacked 41 times this season, second only to Cam Ward, and was just sacked 10 times by the Browns this past week. And this defense against that offensive line at home in a game in which weather can easily be a factor, we could see the Eagles open up as 2 touchdown favorites in this one. Next up is the Bucs going up against the Falcons. So their defense has been leaking oil recently, so I don't blame anyone for not wanting to trust them in the fantasy playoffs. But the last 3 weeks, they faced the Patriots, Bills, Rams, and the week before their bye, they put up 26 fantasy points against the Saints. And the nice thing about the Bucs is we'll get a chance to see them play against lesser opponents than the aforementioned juggernauts the next couple weeks, getting the Cardinals and the Saints, although the Cardinals have been playing a lot better with Brissett. But the point being is we'll get to see how they look the next couple of weeks. Obviously, we'll be monitoring Baker as well, but they get the Falcons week 15. And, Cousins played okay last week against the Saints. He still took 3 sacks and threw a pick, and the Bucs are an aggressive defense, so would expect them to put pressure on him. If you're enjoying the content, please hit that like button. It definitely helps push this out to more audiences. Next player I want to talk about is the 49ers going up against the Titans. So I would expect their roster percentage to jump this week as they face the Browns, but they're on bye week 14. So if you pick them up this week, you can play them, hold them through their bye, and start them week 15 against the Tennessee Titans. And, the Niners have dealt with so many injuries this year, is, not a prototypical Niners defense. But I will say the Monday night game, like Bryce Young was just coming off a career game and they pretty much shut him down. So not to mention this game will be in Santa Clara, and that is a pretty tough place to play. Last defense for week 15 is the Jacksonville Jaguars going up against the Jets. So Jags are kind of quietly a top 10 fantasy defense. And if you pick them up this week for the game against the Titans, or if they're still out there, that might be a good strategy to just hold on to them for week 15 against the Jets. They're an aggressive front. You can see 6 sacks last week against Jacoby Brissett. And looking forward to week 15, they get the Jets, and they're not exactly an offensive powerhouse, even if Tyrod has looked better as a passer than Fields. But, he still takes 3 sacks per game. This is probably more of a one and done defense because I'm not sure if you'd want to trust them on the road against Denver week 16, and definitely not on the road against the Colts in week 17. But in week 15 against the Jets, I think this could be a pretty good play. Moving into week 16 now, we've got the Houston Texans against the Raiders. So the number one fantasy defense and maybe the best NFL defense. Probably not a whole lot that needs to be said about this matchup in this unit, but I did want to suggest them to double check just because their roster percentage is maybe a little bit lower than expected. They're probably not available in your league, but just keep an eye out over the next couple weeks because they get the Colts and the Chiefs on the road in weeks 13 and 14. So there's a decent chance they get dropped, and the big prize is getting the Raiders at home week 16. We just saw what this unit made Josh Allen look like at home. Now imagine how they're going to make Geno look. Next up are the Chiefs going up against the Titans. So there's a good chance they'll be available since they face the Cowboys this week. So the suggestion has to do with the fact that they're facing the Titans week 16 and honestly, maybe even the Broncos week 17. I have them stashed in our home league for week 16 specifically. And I know Cam Ward showed a lot last week against the Seahawks, but as valiant of an effort as that was, he was still sacked 4 times. He leads the NFL in that category. He still only threw for 1 touchdown. He hasn't thrown for more than 1 touchdown in a game all season, and he's usually good for a turnover or 2. I have hope for him long term and hope the Titans build around him this offseason. But going up against the Chiefs, who are likely fighting for a playoff spot, is a tall task for the rookie. Next up, Denver Broncos. So the likelihood that they're going to be available is very low. However, just check in because they get the Jags week 16. Lawrence has been the definition of mediocre this season, maybe a little bit better from a fantasy perspective than a real life perspective, because he has 5 rushing touchdowns on the year, but he's still been turning the ball over at a high rate. He ranks 5th in sacks taken this season. And of course, this is just targeting an elite defense. So again, probably not owned, but just double check. Next up are the Bills going up against the Cleveland Browns. So their defense has been pretty bad lately and are terrible against the run. So I don't blame you if you don't really want to use them, but I did want to include them here because they get the Browns week 16. They'll have more tape on Shedeur by then. And yeah, I know Shador had a decent debut, but he only completed 11 passes, and that long touchdown was thrown behind the line of scrimmage. And yes, the Bills' run defense is terrible, but if they get up early on the Browns, they may have to abandon the run eventually. And also looking forward, this could be a potential weather game too, right? Moving into week 17 now, we've got the Seahawks going up against the Panthers. This one feels painfully obvious, and given their roster percentage, it's highly unlikely that they are available. However, I just want to call out that they face the Colts and the Rams in weeks 15 and 16. So even if they're not available now, there's a small chance they get dropped, and you can stash them for week 17 going up against the Panthers. We talked about the Panthers before. Bryce Young came back down to earth against the 49ers on Monday Night Football. So this is probably going to be the number 1 or 2 ranked defense for the championship week. Next up, LA Rams going up against the Falcons. So this is the defense I personally have stashed in our home league for week 17. Hopefully I get there. And their roster percentage is low because they faced the Bucs last week and of course dominated that game. And the week prior, they picked off Darnold 4 times. We know they're a top 3 real life defense in the NFL. And, even if Drake London is back for this game and he and Bijan have solid games, the floor is just so high with this matchup, and the ceiling to get after Cousins and force some turnovers is just astronomical. So be on the lookout for this one because they are about half available. So I think week 17, you're going to see them ranked top 3 as well. Next up, New England Patriots. So I wanted to be sure to include them on here because I do think there's a slight chance they become more available. They have a bye week 14. Then they get the Bills and the Ravens weeks 15 and 16 before getting the Jets week 17. Now, they did face the Jets a couple weeks ago against Fields, and they did okay, right? They totaled 8 fantasy points, but it was the Jets that scored the first touchdown in that game, so they were able to keep it a little bit more balanced in the beginning before the Pats eventually pulled away. But if the Pats build up a commanding lead early and they force the Jets to throw, their defense could be in a good position to force a bunch of sacks and maybe cause a couple turnovers. So again, another one that's highly available, but like I mentioned before, could see them dropped in some places just given their matchups leading up to that game. Final defense, and this is a much deeper pull, is the New York Giants going up against the Las Vegas Raiders. So, we've got the number 31 ranked fantasy defense that are 3% owned. And, not only did they get absolutely torched by Gibbs last week, but they get the Patriots this week, and then they have a bye week 14. So you don't even have to stash them now. Just wanted to put them on your radar because they do get the Raiders week 17. Maybe Jackson Dart is a league winner going up against the Raiders in that one. But I will say the only saving grace for the Giants defense is they're an aggressive, talented front. So they should be able to put a ton of pressure on Geno behind that offensive line. And with that, thank you guys so much for watching. If you're still here, hit that like and subscribe, and we'll talk to you in the next one.